We're going to be looking right now at millennials by the numbers. In fact, at the minimal gains for millennials in New York City. Our first slide up here, just by the numbers. From 2010 to about 2014, New York City has some 1 million millennials. Now, for our purposes, we're defining those as folks between the ages of 18 and 29. Now, 29-year-olds in this period have earned some 11.3% less than those of their counterparts in 2000. So just that short time period later, earning 11% less than those came before them. And more than 60% of young adults moving to the city were millennials, were white people. 25% were Asians. We're going to drill down a little bit more into those numbers and show you that of the people who are moving in, most came from states like New Jersey, California, or Pennsylvania at the top. Now, blacks made up about 9% of the young people arriving in the city, but accounted for 20% of those who'd said, all right, enough, I'm out of here. Young Hispanic people came and went at about the same rate. Now, looking forward into more numbers, those black and Hispanic millennials face significantly worse unemployment rates than their white or Asian counterparts. More than 20% of city residents were aged 23 to 29 and have a high school diploma and aren't engaged in either higher education or working at all, those disaffected youth we've heard so much about. And in 2014, millennials made up a larger portion of the city's population than the baby boomers who came a few generations before them. And as of 2014, Hispanics are the city's largest ethnic racial group among young people. So that's a look at millennials and the minimal gains being made by that generation. Now let's get into the A block.
They outnumber baby boomers, and if you were born between 1985 and 1996, you are one of them being millennials. Even if you weren't born during that period, the fate of those 20-somethings may be tied to the well-being of the entire city. So says a new report out of the City Comptroller's office titled New York City's Millennials in Recession and Recovery. And the Comptroller is here now to tell us more. Welcome back to BK Live, Scott Stringer.
Great to be here.
No, it was certainly great to have you here, and once again, such an honor. Now, I just have to begin by saying, Brian, as you quoted Frank Sinatra, he said, hey, if you can make it here, you can make it anywhere. You know, in New York City, everybody seems to sort of have it rough. The elderly, minorities, immigrants, you know, people just moving here for the first time. What is so noteworthy about the status of millennials?
What's noteworthy is that the millennial generation is actually the largest population group in the entire city. They now make up 19% of the population, and by any measure, they are the future. They're the next generation that's going to hold up the city. They're going to be the future business leaders, the future entrepreneurs, the next generation of political leadership. So it is important to discuss them and try to figure out the challenges that they have, just like we do with other populations, whether it's seniors or the baby boomer generation. We're not really talking a lot about this age group, and I thought it would be smart on our part to sort of drill down and look at their prospects, look at the challenges they face, and that's what we did. And the report, I think, gives us a lot of data that we perhaps knew instinctively, but once you put pen to paper, you can clearly see that we need to do more to help our young people.
So what does all of that mean for the city itself, especially if these people are supposed to further us and get a better tax base, but they're actually drawing on a lot of city services?
Well, here's the issue. What I conclude from the report is the millennials are having a harder time starting their careers, breaking through. The good news is when they do break through, they make it big. So adjust the song a little bit, you know, and I'll leave that to you.
If you can tough it out, you might be able to make it.
You can tough it out and shake it off. And you'll do the lyrics. We'll figure it out on BK. But what I do want to think about is, what we should talk about is, look, after the Great Recession, We talked a lot about how we were going to lift up cities and programs that were put in place, and we really missed the boat. We didn't really look at how we could help the next working generation. We didn't look at student debt, which, by the way, in New York City accounts for $14 billion. These young people are carrying $14 billion in student debt, way too much. So when you talk about how to lift off and break through, you're paying a VIG. That's very tough. The second thing is, while we like to talk about our surging economy, I've talked about this before on the show, we have a record 4 million jobs now in the city. We've never had more people working in the city. Right. But the challenge is that a lot of these are in low-wage jobs, in tourism and fast food industry. And these young people can't afford that apartment or that $2 million condo that's the entrance fee to the city. And we don't want them to leave, because the New York strategy, the success story is, we get people from all over the world. We get people from all different countries. We replenish ourselves because we're a magnet. So if housing is too expensive and we don't have a millennial strategy, I worry that we're not going to reinvent or create the synergy that has made us the epicenter of the world.
How far ahead does this report sort of look, in that you're able to crunch the data, but with the recommendations and the strategies and the solutions that you choose to implement, what would a recovery look like for millennials, and how long would that take for us to actually see?
We need to have, I think, a real strategy to make sure that our young kids in school, in high school and college, those that are here, those that are coming here, really have a science background, an engineering background, because the one industry that is ripe for them to take is the high-tech economy. Even in financial services, we saw a lot of real wages down for our young people. Here's something else that we found: 20% less money is being made by millennials today than a generation ago. So real wages is down 20%. We've got to make sure there's a pipeline to the high-tech economy, where we do see, when someone gets a job, those wages actually increased over time. And we have to push further and faster. It's the sciences, coder jobs, programmer jobs. We have got to make sure that our young people are developing those skills, because when they do, they will get into that higher wage. They will get higher wages and a real career path.
So you spoke about those low-wage jobs that a lot of people saddled with college debt have to undertake, and they're competing with disaffected folks who may not have gone to college and have bad job prospects. So what happens to the city when those people decide, all right, I'm going to Detroit, it's the new frontier, or I'm going to go out west? How does that affect the city when these young people say, I've had enough?
Well, I was just in Detroit on Saturday, and nothing against Detroit, but it's not New York.
Yeah.
So
not yet.
anyone, it's never going to be New York, because there's only one New York.
Yeah.
And people dream as kids from all over the world.
They do.
We
do.
We do, right?
We do.
Listen, you can admit that you're getting past the millennial stage, and don't worry, I'm going to be there with you.
Well, we're also talking about millennial adjacent. So it's not just the people born between 85 and 96, but I think everybody is sort of feeling the ramifications of sort of stagnant wages and higher costs of living. I want to change focus just a little bit. Conversation we're having, many millennials a lot of times vote independent, but when they come to New York City, a lot of times that is a problem. So do you think a lot of the political power of millennials is going untapped in New York City?
Well, I think the issue of being an independent is one of not being familiar with your options as it relates to the election law. A lot of people want to view themselves as independent thinkers, but if they knew they could only vote in a Democratic primary, if they were Democrats, would gladly be Democrats. This is a Democratic town. This is the party that picks almost all of our elected officials.
It's the real election.
It's the real election. So people don't realize that, because the Board of and the Board of Elections does nothing to have seminars or a website that really talks about this. I meet people on the street all the time and say, I want to vote for you. I said, great. I said, yeah, I'm an independent, and I'll vote for you in November. I said, well, the Kermit the Frog's going to win in November. I'm in trouble. I got to fight in the Democratic primary. So I think lack of information to new people, or even even folks who live here about the difference in how you vote for party. But second, this election was a continuation of disgraceful practice. 125,000 people in Brooklyn purged from the rolls in one of the most competitive, important presidential elections in decades in New York City. Whether you were for Bernie or Hillary, or even if you mistakenly voted for a Republican, how much more difficult does it have to be? You go to your polling place, it's not open in time. Now you got to get your kid to school and you to work. You come and they tell you got to go to 3 different locations because we don't know where your registration card is. There's no same-day voter registration. So if you got excited about this election a few days before and you said, hey, I'm not registered to vote, there's nothing you can do. You're excluded. We don't have early voting. So for people with busy lives, unlike in other states where you can vote early, you can't do that in New York. We have suppressed the voting here. And here's something that is troubling. Hot primary, everyone talking about it, people pouring out to Hillary rallies, Bernie rallies. We're all in. We're talking about this on shows and talk shows. 19% of the state turned out to vote. Out of all the primary states, we were next to last. We rivaled Louisiana in terms of voter turnout. Now, why would we ever be in the same political house as Louisiana? Come on. This is New York City. We are sophisticated voters. We are passionate about our city and our politics. And so we don't encourage people to vote. I'm auditing the Board of Elections because it's time to take a sledgehammer to this process and say democracy is about voting. And we can no longer let the political class dictate how our young people participate and how others who want to get engaged can't find a way to get to a voting machine.
Well, speaking of those voter rolls and the people who fell off in Brooklyn in particular, the only person to face some sort of ramifications has been a suspension, and she's like a Republican party voter person at the Board of Elections. So what's happening there? Why would the only person to face discipline be responsible for Republican voter rolls and not even folks on the Democratic side?
Well, believe it or not, the Board of Elections is not run as a professional agency. It's run by...
I can believe it.
Okay, I guess you believe it. They're run by Republicans and Democrats, and they share the running of the board. The executive director is a nice enough guy. I know him. I have respect for him. But to turn around and say, well, this was just a normal voting day, well, maybe he's right, but this has been going on. This has become normal. And the new normal now is, well, you purge 125,000 people, pick a scapegoat, and move on. It's not going to go down this way anymore. We're going to audit. We're going to do operations audit, management audit. We're going to take a very deep dive. In the meantime, we're going to make suggestions about the November election that's coming. We're going to have record turnout as we do for presidential elections. And we need more personnel. We need more resources. We need people to come and volunteer and help the process.
Yeah, Comptroller, how do you keep it in the front of people's minds, especially now it's already slipping behind Michael and Kelly fighting on the talk show when people were disenfranchised on Election Day, and it's sort of creeping out of the consciousness of the greater populace?
You talk to folks in Brooklyn, but you also, the larger issue. I actually found this election, people were so angry. They were angry that even if they could vote, they were just angry that there was a real barrier to participation in this presidential election. This is such... this was such an unusual primary in New York because usually we're forgotten. By the time the primary rolls into New York, it's done, right? But that wasn't the case here. This was like almost the decisive, and we're New York City, and we've got to start becoming better at running elections. You know, if the political class is going to run the elections, you would think they would know how to do it better than anybody. Well, that hasn't been the case.
Surprise.
Well, they're not doing it. So we've got to go in, audit, make recommendations, and figure this out.
When can we expect that audit to be done?
It's going to take a while. You know, our audits, when they come, they come.
It's a big old problem.
It's a big old problem, and audits in the Comptroller's office can take up to a year or more. But that means when we do release it, it will be a strong, independent review. I'm not taking sides here. I'm not making... I'm not looking in. We're now setting up the audit, but when we release it, I hope it's going to be strong and important for the city.
Well, you know, I have to say, thank you so much for your foresight in this report about the millennials, just to back it up just one more moment. But to anyone who is watching or anyone who may see this video clip online is still thinking about moving to New York to fulfill their dreams, or they're thinking about maybe not renewing their lease because they're looking at their finances. Help is on the way, and what do you say to those millennials to let them know that New York cares about them?
Come join us. We will figure this out. Look, it's good to have a discussion about this because how do we make it better? I'd rather know our challenges to speak directly to people 18 to 29 as opposed to putting our head in the sand and not anticipating the struggle. So this is a good document because what does it suggest? We should not be satisfied with low unemployment rate because we are seeing expanding job market that is in low-wage jobs. Right. So let's tackle that. We want to look at our housing stock, right? If we don't create affordable housing in this city, then the young kids, the future generation who can't afford $1 million condo, they're not going to come here. Well, if we allow that to happen, then what have we prepared the city for? We're going to end up in a very serious situation. So I love this discussion. You can't keep young people away from New York. Right?
You can't do it.
You can't do it, right? They just can't do it. Look at all the people who want to visit us. They want to see what we look like, how we walk, how we talk, what we're about.
For business.
Business.
Thank you, sir.
Sir.
Always a pleasure.
Good to see you.